In this class, we are going to discuss about ball and journal bearings. As you know by now that everything depends on our bearings. We put our transducers at the bearings, okay. But the bearings themselves could be having fault. So far we have discussed about faults in the rotating systems, be it the shaft misalignment, shafts having unbalance, shafts having cracks in them. But eventually all the measurements are done at the bearing locations, and we in the earlier cases we had assumed that the bearings were okay, but that is not true. Bearings themselves have so many rotating elements that themselves could be defective. So, we in this class we are going to focus on these two important classes of bearings, the ball bearings or the anti-friction bearings and the journal bearings. In our class in rotordynamics, we have seen the importance of journal bearings, because of the fact that journal bearings can take huge amount of static loads onto them, and they are practically there the shaft is actually supported on a fluid film. So, there is no contact between the shaft and the journal, there is no metal to metal contact, and they can take heavy loads. However, in the journal bearings there are issues of stability, and particularly in flexible systems. The stability in journal bearing is of a critical concern, which is not apparently so in the case of anti-friction bearings. Okay. But in large gas turbines, steam turbines, wherever we have journal bearings, stability is very important. So, the oil film thickness, the clearance between the journal and the shaft, all these the load on the shaft, the rotating speeds, all these control the stability of the systems, and that is very important, which we will not discuss in this class, which we had discussed I think in the class on rotordynamics. But in this class we are going to focus on what happens or what indications we get when there is a defect in the ball bearings and defect in the journal bearings. Okay. So, well, why do we have bearings? We have bearings to reduce friction between two moving parts, and the bearings support these rotating shafts. Okay. So, if I have a shaft which is rotating, shaft is carrying a lot of weight. So, they have to be supported on bearings. And I have to give very less friction to the rotating element. That is my requirement, less friction and support the load. So, one way to reduce less friction is to have them finely polished surfaces, hard surfaces, which will not wear off, and then they will support load. Another is put an oil film. Now, when you have this oil film here in a journal bearing, you have an eccentricity, okay, because of the converging diverging zone. There will be this fluid pressure, fluid here, and because of the fluid pressure, this shaft is going to get lifted off the journal, and then the shaft is going to support. So, we have the case of the journal bearing, and of course, the anti-friction bearing. But in the journal bearing, particularly there is a layer of oil or lubricant. It is actually this oil. So, this lubricating oil can give different amounts of friction depending on the Z n by P, where Z is the viscosity and P is the pressure of this oil, N is the speed RPM, and this is the famous Petrov's law. And then you will see that okay. I am sorry. some extent this will go up. Okay. And this is the case of the boundary layer, where the boundaries are almost touching, mixed layer, and then the hydrodynamic. Okay. And we are talking about bearing in this hydrodynamic region, wherein the friction is less. Right. So, this anti-friction bearing could be of many types, could be ball bearings, roller bearings. Basically, an anti-friction bearing has an outer race, an inner race, and these could be the this is the outer race, this is the inner race, these are the rolling elements. Which are usually balls, rollers, or even sometimes tapered rollers. And then there is a cage or a retainer, which ensures that no two rolling elements come together. This is a thin metal strip, and they are actually riveted here, and this is the cage or retainer. At some times, the inner race rotates with the shaft, typical cases, or sometimes the outer race rotates, like in the case of the ceiling fan bearing. The hub is actually stationary, hub is attached to the ceiling, the shaft coming on. So, ceiling fans outer race rotates. In typical other cases, all the electric motors etc., it is the inner race which is rotating. Rotates, sometimes we call them as race or ring. Okay. So, the idea behind this bearings, anti-friction bearing, is they have to, in any bearing, they have to give less friction. So, to give less frictions, they have to be moving without any obstruction. So, these elements are manufactured to be very fine surface, hard surface, and they are lubricated once they come out of the factory. They are lubricated at the factory and sealed forever. Okay, thin layer of lubrication. Okay. And this is the first type, the anti-friction bearing or the ball bearing or the roller bearing. This is how it looks like. And the hydrodynamic bearings, basically we have in the journals where there is pad, and then where there are grooves for the oil to come in and so on, and which we discussed in the case of fluorodynamics. I will not go to journal bearings right now. We will focus more on the anti-friction bearings, and because most of the cases, small machines etc., they only have sets of anti-friction bearings, which could be self-aligning also. Okay. So, this is how, what are the main components of a rolling element, which we just saw: the inner race, outer race. The rolling elements could be either ball, roller, cylinder, tapered roller, needle etc. Cage, separator, retainer, they are the same things. Okay. Now, why do vibration signals from the bearings occur? That is the characteristics of vibration signals from the bearings, because once bearings are put on housings, I have a bearing here, and this is some shaft, and I have put a transducer here. This is my transducer. So, these shafts are carrying loads, okay, and sometimes these loads are directional. Speed may be fluctuating. So, the load coming to the system or the excitation coming to the bearings is varying with load, varying with speed. So, these are responsible for this vibration signal which is coming out of the bearings to modulate them. By modulate them, I mean suddenly the amplitude will increase, decrease. So, actually these are the amplitude modulations which are occurring because of the load and speed variations. Okay. On top of it, all these rolling elements have different relative motion. Okay. One is the balls are, for example, the balls are spinning about their own axis and also going about the about the circumference. This is, if this outer race is fixed, okay, this inner race is rotating at an RPM n. So, I can assume that this is rotating at n by 2. Okay, the train, the fundamental train of this rolling elements is moving at speed of n by 2. Okay, this is a fair assumption, because this is 0, this is n by 2, linear assumption. Okay. So, you see all these individual components, the cage, the inner race or the outer race, one is either stationary, either the inner race is stationary in the case of a ceiling fan like I told you, or the outer race is stationary in the case of an electric motor. So, these elements are all rotating at different frequencies, and that is what gives rise to the high frequencies in the, even in a good bearing you will see, even in a good bearing you will see these frequencies coming up in the vibration spectrum of the vibration which we measure. The best part about the bearing vibrations is, for example, if I have a shaft which are supported on bearings, these are my bearings, and I have put my transducer somewhere here. Transducers will record the 1x vibration because of the rotational speed, but they will also find out the bearing frequencies plus bearing frequencies, but you will see the bearing frequencies you will calculate any time, they are actually some fractions, either 0.6 of x, 1.2 of x, so, and they depend on the bearing geometry. By bearing geometry, I mean the pitch diameter, the ball diameter or the rolling element diameter, the number of balls small n, the rotational speed, the contact angle. So, these frequencies are no way related to 1x, 2x, 3x, which we saw in the case of rotating shafts. And that is again why you will be wondering, well, always I am putting my transducers on the bearing mounts. What if the bearing frequencies are contaminating or mixing with my actual shaft defect frequencies of misalignment, crack, unbalance. That will not happen because they are at different frequencies. The bearing frequencies themselves are at a different value compared to the shaft frequencies, and that is actually helping us. And like I told you in spectrum analysis, every peak in the vibration spectrum corresponds to a particular defect in a particular mechanical element. It could be a bearing fault, it could be a shaft fault, it could be an unbalance, it could be a gearbox fault. They are all different frequencies, and that is really saved the work for us. Okay. But another thing also happens in the bearing is, because there is a defect in a bearing, a lot of high frequencies get generated, and I will come to that just in a little while. But what are the sources of bearing vibration? Okay. So, once we manufacture this bearing, when you say this outer race, inner race to be a perfect circular ring, we manufacturing them through a grinding process, through a polishing process, through a buffing process to make a perfect circular ring. But after this ring has been manufactured, if you take a dial gauge and measure the ovality of this ring, it will not be circular. You will be surprised to know that it will be somewhat, this is not a sharp peak here, but these variations, a ring, a circle which should have been the green circle actually looks like this, and this could be order of 2 micron, very small, but this is there in a new bearing also, and this is known as the waviness of the ring, or what is known as the out of roundness. Through a precise measurement of the wave of the surface profile, you will see that it is not a perfect circle, it is something like this. So, bearing manufacturers, when they manufacture bearing, they ensure that they do good amount of finishing operations in the buffing, final polishing operations, so that this happens. And on top of it, if you will see that we have these rolling elements actually riding on these waves. Okay. So, if you put it flat on a surface, so we have a wavy surface on which these rolling elements are moving. This train is moving at a high speed. So, this gives rise to the vibration response. In vibration, you must have studied, when you go over a wavy surface, what kind of amplitudes you get. All of you must have experienced going on a motorbike on a wavy road. You would have experienced those amplitudes coming up. Same thing happens in a bearing. So, this is why even in a good bearing we have vibrations, because of the out of roundness while they have manufactured it. Okay. On top of it, if you look at another important component, that is the surface roughness of the components. This surface, it was any of the surface was supposed to be manufactured all these surfaces were supposed to be manufactured as nice flat surface with an RA or the center line average of the surface roughness to be very low. But if you look under the microscope, there will be lot of valleys and pits, and this is because of the valleys and pits, valleys and peaks, and they are not smooth, they have an surface roughness. So, imagine a rough surface moving over another rough surface. This rough surface could be that of a ball or a rolling element or a roller riding on an inner race and outer race, which also has a surface roughness and which is wavy. And this is what is actually there in a bearing at a microscopic level. So, all these wavy surfaces, they are having motion, and that is why these vibrations come even if you have a good bearing. Now, to reduce this, manufacturers what they do is they ensure that they have good amount of manufacturing operations in terms of polishing operations. On top of it, at the factory when the bearings are manufactured, they put a layer of lubricant right once the bearings are manufactured. So, these lubricants will go into these pits and valleys and try to make a smooth surface. So, if you hold a new bearing and if you just play around with the bearing, you will not feel any roughness to your hand because of these lubrications. To remove the lubrication, if you take this new bearing and wash it with kerosene and remove the lubricant, you can all do that and feel it, you will feel very too much amount of roughness in your feel, because the vibrations have increased because you have removed the lubricant by washing it with kerosene. Okay. So, that is the reason why new bearings also have vibrations. It is not true that new bearings will not have vibrations. New bearings have vibrations because of these two reasons, waviness and surface roughness. On top of it, things become more complicated. In the sense, let us come to this case of the presence of dirt. Now, imagine on a surface, smooth surface, you suddenly come across a bump or a pothole. So, these, and then you have a rolling element. So, these bumps or potholes, these bumps could be because of presence of a dirt on the surface of the inner race and outer race, very hard silica particles, sand particles. They are very hard, they will not disappear. So, they are going to scrape the surfaces, they are going to corrode, or if there are some scratch markers, there is like potholes. So, imagine when you go on a bicycle over a pothole, you get this impulse. So, these rolling elements are subjected to a force of this nature, an impulse force. In the time domain, if you look at the force, they are subjected to a pulse like this, and this is an impact force. So, this rolling element which are rotating in the inner or the outer race are subjected to such impact forces because they came in contact with a hard dirt particle, which is like a bump on the road, or there are some pits on the inner race because of some corrosion, something has happened, there is a pitting mark, some scratch marks. So, these impacts, basically these forces impact the bearing's elastic structure. The bearing has mass, bearing has elasticity. So, bearing also has a natural frequency of its own. Bearing has a natural frequency K by M. It has mass, it has stiffness. So, it has a natural frequency. Now, if you look at the frequency response of an impact force, it is basically a random force. In the frequency domain, an impact would look like this: force, impulse, short time force would have lot of frequency, lot of forces in the frequency domain, a white noise. Now, imagine if the bearings equation, if I write some force. This force happens to F sin omega t, where it is omega is equal to 1 to infinite for that matter, because this goes all the way up. So, that means this bearing is getting excited at all frequencies. Agreed? Why did they get excited at all frequencies? Because of this impact force or impulse force. So, the right hand side of this equation has got all the frequency components. Now, it may happen. So, these are the forcing frequency. It may so happen that the forcing frequency is equal to the natural frequency of the rolling element. Bearing has been designed. So, and we always design a bearing to ensure that its natural frequency of a bearing of the bearing is away from the operating frequency. By operating frequency means I mean the shaft rotating speed and few harmonics of it. So, it should not interfere with the operating frequency. Usually, a bearing's natural frequency are in the order of 20 to 30 kilohertz, because we never operate at these frequencies. So, the bearing would never undergo a resonance conditions. But the problem is, because I have excited it here by an impulse force which has all the frequencies, the natural frequency gets excited. So, I will have a large response at its high frequency. Okay. So, resonance of components occur. That means, the bearings have got excited at its natural frequency. So, if I see a high frequency vibration in the order of 20 to 30 kilohertz in the ultrasonic range, if I see a high increase in the vibration level, I can say for surely bearing has undergone a fault. Okay. And that is what actually people use in an instrument called as a shock pulse meter. So, shock pulse meter is actually nothing but an handheld instrument for bearing fault detection. It is nothing but an high frequency bearing vibration measurements. So, basically essentially a high frequency 20 to 30 kilohertz vibration measurement or monitoring device. And because high frequency vibration occurs in defective bearings, because the resonant frequency of a defective race because of a pit, scratch, dirt gets excited, and you know the physics why it got excited, because I excited the right hand side of the equation by a forcing function which happens to have the natural frequency of the system. Obviously, so resonance happened and then I have high frequency vibrations. So, a bearing vibration, a bad bearing vibration would have the frequencies of these inner race, outer race, cage, retainer, etc., plus a sure case to say that the bearing has failed is when you see a high frequency vibration in the 20 to 30 kilohertz range. Okay. So, to understand this, we did a small experiment in the lab, and basically what we have here is a motor driving a 6203 bearing. Okay. And all we have to do is put an accelerometer and put a filter, have a NI data acquisition card, and we take all the data to the computer, and then we have a photoelectric probe to measure the rotational speed, because as you will see all the bearing frequencies are dependent on the rotational speed of this shaft, and these frequencies can actually be calculated. And in fact, the rolling element bearing defect frequencies, we can call them as defect frequencies, we can call them as bearing frequencies as also, and they are given by these equations. The outer race defect frequency is given by n by 2 times RPM by 60 times 1 minus ball diameter by pitch diameter times cosine of the contact angle beta. Okay. And one is minus, one is plus, and then the ball defect frequencies, where small n is the number of balls RPM is the relative rotational speed between the inner and outer race, BD is the ball diameter, PD is the pitch diameter, and beta is the contact angle. So, these can be calculated from the bearing manufacturer, where all the bearing manufacturer give this data. Some of them give only the ball diameter, not the pitch diameter. Sometimes they do not give the catalog in the catalogs the number of balls, but you can always find them in the internet or measure them or talk to the manufacturer. So, here what we have done in this experiment is we took a 6203 bearing, okay, which had a ball diameter of 6.747 millimeters, pitch diameter of 28.7 millimeters. The number of balls in the rolling element bearing was 8, contact angle was 0. So, cosine beta is 1, speed of motor, it was running at 1800 rpm, is 30 hertz. So, this motor was running at 1800 rpm. We have a bearing here, and in this bearing actually we had a series of 6203 bearings manufactured by a company wherein we could artificially create defects in the inner race by putting an electric scratch mark through an electric etching pen. We could create scratch marks in the rolling elements, we could create scratch marks in the outer race. So, then we one by one we manufactured bearings, defective bearings, and put them in this rig, and then we measured the vibrations. So, the theoretically calculated values for a rotational speed of 30 hertz, the fundamental train frequency is 11.4 hertz, ball spin frequency is 60.3, outer race frequency is 91.8, inner race is 148.2. You will see here nowhere the bearing frequencies are multiples of 30 hertz. There are some decimal fractions of the inner race, outer race of the rotational speeds. So, that is a good indicator. Now, this one here, just to give you a feel of the bearing vibrations, how they look like when there is no defect and there is a lot of defect. So, when there is no defect, the amplitude levels of vibrations are very, very low if you compare to the second one, which is a case of a defective bearing. And if you look at the time history, they are almost periodic, okay, and then there are very small peaks, but the magnitude is very, very low, 0.01. But in this case, we have bearings which were there were a lot of defects, and you will see this impact nature. Okay. This is because of the potholes or the dirts, so it is ringing. Okay. So, this is, if you just look at the time domain signal of a good vibration from a bearing and a bad vibration of a bearing, you can right away say, looking at it, this is a bad bearing. Okay. So, you will see time domain analysis itself is very, very helpful to identify bearing faults. And if you will do the feature calculation from these signals, like its mean, RMS, you will see obviously the RMS value of this is much higher than this. But there are factors like the kurtosis of the bearing signals. If I measure the kurtosis, you will see the kurtosis values of these bad bearings are pretty much high, more than about 4 or 5, and then you can say for sure that this is a bad bearing. And this is how the spectrum looks like. Now, the earlier example was for the case of the time domain, okay, and then these are both time histories. The same now has been converted to the frequency domain, and from 0 to 500 you will see for a good bearing the amplitudes are low, and you see the fundamental train frequency and the shaft frequency showing up, nothing else. But once you have defective bearing, first of all the amplitudes are high, and almost in this case there was an inner race defect, the ball defect or outer race defect, all these frequencies are showing up. Okay, and these are sure cases, and in this bearing we are not even monitoring the high frequency vibrations. I had told you about 20 to 30 kilohertz. Okay, but the reason I told you to monitor the high frequency vibrations from 20 to 30 kilohertz is for the fact that bearings are actually put in systems where there could be frequencies of faults from other defects like in shaft misalignment, unbalance, etc. So, they will smear the spectrum. Okay. It will be very difficult for you to distinguish many frequencies, other defect frequencies, okay, unless you have a very fine resolutions or really a good eye for it. Okay. So, a sure test is that high frequency monitoring through a shock pulse measurement. Okay. And this is how this waviness and out of roundness looks like. So, this is the good bearing acceleration signal. Okay. This is the bearing signal with outer race defect. Okay. You can measure. Okay. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 0.2 by 18. That would be approximately how much? About 0.3, is it? On the time period is 0.2 seconds. So, 200 by 18, 0.01 seconds. Okay. Okay, and this is 1 by 30 is actually 0.3, isn't it? 0.03. Okay. And you can actually, looking at this, you can say whether the more what is the spatial spacing of these defects, whether 2 defects are there or 1 defects are there. In fact, I am not sure about what defect we have put here, okay. But this is that no defect case, only with outer race defect. Okay. The multiples come up. It is not only the single frequencies, but also their multiples. Yes, 2 outer race defects 180 degree apart. In this case, what we did is we created one defect here and another defect here. Okay. And this is for the inner race defect. Sometimes you will see the shaft frequencies showing up, because the inner race is attached to the shaft. And here, when we have the ball defect, only defects in the ball frequencies will show up. And how are these frequencies calculated? This is inner race, outer race, ball, all 3 were there. Okay. What I am going to show you is, I am sorry, these equations. So, these equations are there in the books. These equations you can know, only thing that you have to know the ball diameter, pitch diameter, and contact and find out this, and then you can find out. Okay. So, this is usually what you will see when you measure the vibrations out of a bearing in case of the defect free and in case of defect. Okay. And this kurtosis value gives you an indication as to why this faults, whether the fault has occurred in the bearing itself. Okay. You blindly pass it through a signal processor wherein you just calculate the kurtosis of the time domain signal. And usually kurtosis gives the peakiness of the signal, okay. And usually kurtosis value is greater or more than 5 is case of a defective case, and less than 3 is the normal case. Okay. Because if these bearing faults go unnoticed, for example, a crack in a bearing outer race, if it goes unnoticed, we are going to have problems. The bearings are going to fail. Okay. And many times I'll tell you in other case studies, many times when particularly in electrical motors, when there is a electrical conductance occurring through the bearings, because the shafts are carrying rotors, okay, and there is a lot of magnetic flux, and this flux gives rise to small ground voltages. Okay. And this at the bearings, because of the oil film, that is a sparking, very significant sparking occurs. So, this grounding is not done properly, the sparking is going to occur, and the sparking is giving rise to pits. So, if a bearing goes dry, not lubricated, not properly cared for, pitting marks will occur. Pitting occurs because of electrical sparking. So, this is going to give rise to the initiation of these defects. Okay. So, a good bearing has to be lubricated, kept in dirt free environment, and ensure that pitting, dirts do not enter, and then you also do not overload the bearing more than it was designed for. So, bearings, if they go unnoticed, eventually if a bearing fails, your machine has failed, your shaft is going to come down, loads are going to come down, everything is going to fail. Misalignment in the shaft is going to give rise to a high axial force. Sometimes in the journal bearings, parrot bearings, you will see a lot of ununiform wear occurring. Ununiform wear again gives rise to ununiform clearances, and then the forces are going to vary, the support forces are going to vary. Again, this give rise to fatigue loading. So, it is actually a dominoes effect, kind of one leads to another. Okay. So, we have to be careful whether who came first. So, I will give you at the closer, I will just talk about a small case particularly in a paper mill, wherein we have to be careful about the supporting the bearings which are there in the number of rolls which are there in a bearing. So, this is the flow chart of a paper mill. Basically, you have the this area where the pulps etc. come, okay, the paper pulp etc. come, and then they are shredded and mixed with the caustic soda etc., cleaned, bleached, impurities removed, and this pulp, paper pulp, is actually fed through a wire press, wherein there is a steel wire which is going in, and then basically they are pressed here in the first stage, so that the water is squeezed out from this pulp. Okay. And this pulp is, this black line is made to pass through rollers, wherein we do a lot of drying. So, initially once you dry this wet pulp, okay, and then slowly this paper is going to get formed, and paper will be, they pass through about 20-30 big drying drums, and each are supported on rollers on bearings, and bearings are and they are steam dried. There are steams going through these drums, and eventually at the end they are hot pressed after the dryer, and that is called as the calendering operation, and finally they are put into roll, and then the rolls go to the market. So, if you will see in a typical paper mill, there are about 200 to 300 rolls, just rolls rotating at, and a typical speed is about 1000 meters per minute. At that speed, 1000 meters per minute, this papers come out at about 1000 meters per minute, okay, and then roll. And typical production is about 80 tons per day, 80 tons of paper per day, particularly the newsprints. Okay. And these bearings, if one bearing fails, because this is operation in series, everything has to be shut down. So, these bearings have to be monitored around the clock, and this is one view of the press section near the washer, wherein the pulp has been fed. This is a wire onto which this the takeoff roll. It's a very big roll. You can see my student standing there. It's about 1 meter to 2 meter in diameter. Okay, and then they go in through these rolls, and this is the pressing section. There are a few presses here and the other side, and you will see these rolls coming in here. And in this particular plant, and then you will see a lot of these drums, okay, big drums, and in one drum, one side of the drums, there are actually steam going in, heating the drum. So, drums are very hot. Okay. So, because the water has to be dried, after you have pressed and removed the water from the paper pulp, it has to be now dried over series of rolls. Okay. And then these are the bearings. I have another view. Yeah, every roll there is a bearing. There is a bearing here, the bearing here, and you will see in such a plant, the bearings are monitored by vibration. You will see this white lines here. This is a bearing transducer here, another bearing transducer here, another bearing transducer here. So, round the clock vibration monitoring of this rolling bearings are being done, because and then there are diagnostic algorithms wherein people can know which vibration signal is coming from which bearing, what is its kurtosis value, what is its spectrum value. Okay. And if you, because these are very critical operation, because imagine if one roll breaks and falls, it is going to damage few other rolls, it is going to damage few other bearings, and to put everything together, you can imagine the problem one has to face. Okay. So, everywhere, depending on the criticality of the equipment or the process of the plant, monitoring of rolling element bearing is essential. Okay. And particularly in paper mills, etc., this monitoring of bearings is done sometimes continuously online through these. And nowadays, the state of the art is right at the bearings, they are having transmitters, wireless transmitters. So, that in a complicated plant, you need not have all that cabling coming to junction, rather you have over the wireless and with the proper routers, you have the signals which are coming in, and then sitting somewhere remotely in the control room, you can know which bearing signal is where. And people are now in fact monitoring them over the internet. Okay. Sitting in Kharagpur, you can be monitoring a plant in Malaysia. Okay. It is possible. Okay. It is no longer a science fiction. Okay. You could be having your paper mill in Spain, and you can be monitoring the bearing at Kharagpur. Okay. And then you can be giving them diagnostic measures they have to take. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That will be enough of it.